the Mavericks are on the have been close to on the verge of needing to forfeit.
They're a player away from having a forfeit. You got to have 8 to play.
The Dallas Mavericks are flirting with a disaster that almost no one ever sees in the NBA: the threat of forfeiting actual games. If you haven't followed the chaos swirling around this team, buckle up. Injuries have sliced the roster down to nearly nothing, and a frustrating rule says you can't step on the court with fewer than 8 active players. Fall below that line and you risk throwing in the towel on an entire game before tip-off. It sounds unthinkable, right? A professional franchise loaded with expectations, possibly walking away from competition like a high school team lacking bench warmers. Yet here we are, eyeing a scenario that could go down in history as one of the wildest collapses in the modern NBA. The puzzle pieces point to one man in the front office, GM Nico Harrison, and a series of moves that cratered the team's depth. Fans who once wore Mavs jerseys with pride are now checking out in droves, and a new poll shows a stunning 79.5% of them losing interest. How did we get here? And why does it all come back to a trade that once seemed too big to fail?
Why are we doing this today to Dallas?
No.
Steven's never going to carry Texas now. What are we doing to Dallas?
But that's not the entire story. Things get even stranger when you consider the star power. Specifically, a certain big man who was supposed to steady the ship after Luka Doncic was traded. Instead, it looks like his presence is speeding up the crash. There's plenty of blame to go around, but you might be shocked at just how precarious the Mavs situation truly is. But that's not all right now. Dallas is clinging to the minimum roster requirement with a patchwork lineup nobody saw coming. On paper, it's not the worst team in NBA history, but in reality, they're 1 or 2 injuries away from having to forfeit games. If you've ever wondered why the NBA set the rule requiring at least 8 active players, the Mavs' situation is Exhibit A. For a team with championship aspirations, it's almost unthinkable to be so short-handed. This isn't a late-season tank job with rookies plugging holes. It's the middle of a supposed retooling era after dealing away the franchise star, Luka Doncic, and bringing in Kyrie, Irving, and Anthony Davis. Fans believe that pairing Davis, a top-tier two-way force, with another star was the ideal solution. Then the injuries piled up, and with Kyrie tearing his ACL, the Mavs lost one of their 2 new centerpieces.
This is after Anthony Davis then goes down in his very first game in Dallas. This is after Kyrie Irving tears his ACL.
The meltdown only escalated from there. Klay Thompson arrived via a sign and trade, but that triggered the dreaded first apron, a hard cap that leaves Dallas with virtually no financial wiggle room.
Because the Mavs only have $50,000 below the first apron to spend, they don't have the money to sign a player.
Now, GM Nico Harrison has just $51,000 in space to sign reinforcements, which is laughable if you're trying to snag any legitimate NBA talent. Add to that the depletion of all 10-day deals and two-way contracts nearly hitting their max. And the Mavs are left scraping for bodies, quite literally. It's not just about filling the bench, it's about staying afloat while half your team recovers from various ailments. No matter how you slice it, there's a good chance that at least one more injury could push Dallas below the 8-man minimum. And if that happens, an NBA forfeit, an event we've never truly seen in the modern era, might actually go down. But that's just the top layer of this bizarre story. Keep watching, because there's a lot more to unravel when it comes to why the roster is this fragile in the first place. But listen to this. NBA rules state you need a minimum of 8 active players on your roster to begin any game. If you have fewer than 8, you either scramble for emergency signings or face the unthinkable: a forfeit. While there have been times when teams dressed players who were practically on crutches just to avoid that nightmare, we've never seen a modern team officially wave the white flag before tip-off. One of the strangest historical examples occurred back when the Golden State Warriors were down to 6 healthy bodies, forcing them to place injured players on the bench just to reach the number 8. When additional injuries struck, the Warriors tried to keep a man with 6 fouls on the court. Because if you have nobody else to substitute, the league's rulebook makes weird exceptions. That game turned into a fiasco of battered bodies, limping up and down the floor, angry refs, and technical fouls galore. And as crazy as that was, it still wasn't an official forfeit. Now imagine a modern contender, if we dare still call the Mavs contenders, coming face to face with that scenario. You'd see guys in suits or sweatpants on the bench, never truly intending to play, just to skirt the forfeit rule. But if injuries happen mid-game, you can't fake your way out of it. This possibility looms over Dallas like a dark cloud. threatening to soak them in national embarrassment if even one more mishap strikes the wrong player at the wrong time. The poll suggesting that 4 out of 5 loyal fans are less engaged only deepens the frustration. How did a once proud franchise end up on the brink of an unprecedented meltdown? It gets even crazier. When the Mavs traded Luka Doncic, eyebrows were raised around the league. Why part ways with a generational talent who could have easily been the face of your franchise for the next decade? The official line was that Dallas needed a new identity, but many insiders whispered that Luka was tired of certain off-court dynamics, or that the front office believed Kyrie Irving could finally push them over the top. Fast forward to now, and GM Nico Harrison faces more criticism than ever. He orchestrated the sign and trade for Klay Thompson that triggered the dreaded first apron, severely limiting the team's ability to sign other players. He traded away crucial draft picks in a win-now gamble when the team wasn't exactly on the cusp of hoisting a trophy. Now they're saddled with an aging Anthony Davis, a superstar known for his brilliance, but also for a shaky injury track record. It's bad enough that the Mavs are struggling to keep 8 players on the floor. The real dagger is this horrifying poll suggesting that 79.5% of fans are checking out. That's a gut punch to any franchise. And when revenue drops, especially in a basketball-crazed market, ownership starts looking for a scapegoat. In Dallas, that scapegoat might just be the man pulling the roster strings. The irony is that Nico was once celebrated for landing Kyrie and AD, a new super duo, they said. But the moment Kyrie injured his knee, the house of cards collapsed. Now the chatter around the league is that ownership will have no choice but to dump the GM before the next season tips off. And here's where things take an unexpected turn. Anthony Davis came to Dallas as part of a bold plan to rebrand the franchise without Luka Doncic. He was the perfect complement to Kyrie, an inside-out force on both ends of the floor, capable of anchoring a championship-caliber defense. Yet the timing couldn't be worse. With Kyrie likely out until he's 34, rehabbing his torn ACL, Davis is left to carry a team that might prefer losing in the short term to secure draft picks. That's the dilemma. AD is good enough to win you games, but the Mavs desperately need to stockpile young talent. They've traded away most of their future picks between 2027 and 2030. Some went to Charlotte, others to Oklahoma City, Houston, and San Antonio. All they really have left are picks in this year's draft and next year's. So here's the conflict. Do you keep AD, make a desperate push for the playoffs, and risk losing whatever the meager draft capital remains? Or do you trade him to a contender that's willing to part with assets, effectively waving the white flag for the next season or two in hopes of striking gold in the draft? Fans are losing patience. If the team's new identity was supposed to revolve around winning now, shouldn't they do everything possible to stay competitive? On the other hand, if Kyrie's window to contribute is closing fast, maybe the only logical move is to trade AD and rebuild. But that's not a simple call. Nico Harrison, the man who gambled big on Anthony Davis, might refuse to make that deal because it would be admitting defeat. And right now, no one in Dallas believes the GM wants to own up to this monumental gamble. If ownership doesn't force him out, the Mavs could remain stuck in this limbo, good enough to hover near the middle of the pack, but nowhere close to a title and with no picks to climb out of mediocrity. And what happens next might just change the entire course of Mavs history. Wait until you hear the next part. Some insiders say Nico wants to find another star to fill the gap until Kyrie returns. The rumored name is Kevin Durant, though that's more wishful thinking than a real plan. Durant's salary would force Dallas to gut what little depth they have left, shipping out valuable role players and the last of their future picks. Worse still, Durant is in his mid-30s and injuries have been catching up with him. With Kyrie already in his 30s and AD not exactly an Iron Man, stacking these players on the same team is a roll of the dice most teams wouldn't dare take. Indeed, it's the sort of all-or-nothing gamble that could end with the Mavs in an even deeper hole. But some front offices ignore logic when they smell even a tiny chance at winning a ring. The alternative is plain as day. Fire Nico, trade AD, and pivot toward a genuine rebuild. Tank the upcoming season, aim for a premium lottery pick, and hope to land a generational talent. Somebody who can rescue the franchise from years of short-sighted moves. It would be a painful process. Rebuilds always are. But Mavs fans might prefer a clear direction rather than the confusion they're stuck with now. If ownership chooses that path, it'd mean letting go of the entire win-now vision that started when Luka was shipped away. It's a dramatic shift, but after watching so many supporters walk away, the Mavs might not have much of a choice. This franchise needs hope, and they need it fast. Yet there's another twist to this story. Despite the injuries that forced him to sit some games this year, Anthony Davis remains a force on both ends. When healthy, he's an all-NBA level big man. He's also relatively younger compared to some other stars in this league. That combination of talent and age makes him intriguing to contenders trying to seize a championship window now. One team that stands out is the Golden State Warriors. They thrive when their defense is elite, but they've struggled to maintain that identity at times. Adding AD would solve multiple problems, giving them an anchor in the paint and a player with offensive versatility to mesh with Steph Curry. The Warriors also have assets that might attract Dallas, including future picks and young prospects like Jonathan Kuminga. A hypothetical trade could see the Warriors sending Kuminga Buddy Hield, acquired a previous move they regretted, and 3 first-round picks to Dallas in exchange for Davis. Sounds steep, but that's the going rate for an all-star of his caliber. The Warriors would also happily move on from Buddy, who has struggled to fit the team's high IQ system. Other possible landing spots include the Denver Nuggets, who might want a Twin Towers scenario next to Nikola Jokic, or the Sacramento Kings, who could use a defensive monster beside Domantas Sabonis. In any case, the market would be robust for Davis if the Mavs make him available. If they pull the trigger, they could replenish their stripped-down draft stash and possibly land a promising youngster like Kuminga. It's a blueprint for how to pivot from the AD Kyrie experiment that seems doomed. Yet as it looks to outsiders, Dallas insiders worry that Nico Harrison's pride could block the path to a deal. But the real shocker is still on the way. For many fans, the draft is at the end of a tunnel. It offers hope that some lottery pick will morph into a franchise cornerstone, the way Luka Doncic once did. The Mavs still own their picks in this year's draft and next year's, but after that, it's a long wasteland until 2031, courtesy of trades that shipped out most of their draft capital from 2027 to 2030. If the Mavs do commit to a rebuild, they need immediate success in those 2 drafts. One intriguing name is Cooper Flagg, a rising prospect many consider a future star at the forward position. The problem is, he might choose to stay in college for an extra year, pushing his NBA up to 2026. That would leave Dallas outside looking in if they planned on him to be the next face of the franchise anytime soon. So the entire plan could hinge on what a teenager chooses to do with his amateur career. That's a dangerous bet. Yet the Mavs might have no better alternative. Missing on a high-profile draft pick is one thing, but missing on back-to-back picks when you have almost nothing else in the pipeline? That spells a meltdown that could set you back a decade. A tank next season might be the only way to secure a top 5 selection. But how do you tank with Anthony Davis on your roster? That's precisely why so many experts say you must deal him. Fans prefer clarity, even if it means short-term pain, rather than the awkward approach of half-heartedly trying to win while also hoping for high picks. And what if none of that pans out? Then we might witness a level of frustration from Mavs supporters that makes this year's 79.5% drop in engagement look mild. And it gets even more intriguing. At the end of the day, everything comes down to who calls the shots. If ownership believes that Nico Harrison's decisions led the franchise to the brink of forfeiting games, he might be out sooner than later. Firing him could be the first step to restoring trust among the fan base. It also opens a door for a new regime to make the hard decisions, trading AD, going full rebuild, or making a more approach. But there's always the chance ownership sticks with Nico, hoping lightning strikes twice. Maybe they attempt another star chase, doubling down in a last-ditch push for relevance. That kind of decision could be catastrophic if it fails. More picks gone, more short-term signings with big price tags, and an even more disillusioned fan base if the team can't get results. History suggests that once a fan base checks out, it can take years of winning, sometimes an entire generation of players, before everyone comes back. If the Mavs aren't careful, they could slip into a long stretch of irrelevance, overshadowed by teams like the Rockets, Spurs, and Thunder, who are already brimming with young potential and have plenty of draft picks in the bank. It's a high-stakes game of musical chairs, and Dallas could be the one left without a seat if they don't make the right moves, fast. Forfeiting a game is just the immediate fear hovering over the Dallas Mavericks, but the root issues go so much deeper. This franchise took one giant swing after another, trading Luka, bringing in Kyrie, Irving, and Anthony Davis, and clearing out future picks. Now they're left with a paper-thin roster, a disgruntled fan base, and the looming shadow of the forfeit rule if one more injury sends them below 8 active players. They can try dressing bench warmers on crutches. They can hope Kyrie's ACL heals faster than expected. They can fantasize about landing Kevin Durant or another superstar. But no matter what band-aid they slap on the situation, the fundamental reality is inescapable. The Mavs must either double down on this shaky win-now vision or pivot to a full-scale rebuild. Both paths come with huge risks: financial, reputational, and most of all, emotional for fans who have already lost faith. Nico Harrison's seat is scorching. Anthony Davis could be on the move, and the future of the Dallas Mavericks might hinge on a couple of uncertain drafts, or whether a teenage phenom like Cooper Flagg turns pro sooner rather than later. Sometimes sports stories are simple. Find a star, build around him, and chase a championship. But in Dallas, the only certainty is uncertainty. Where do they go from here? That's the burning question. If this meltdown continues, the franchise could slip further into the abyss, losing games by default, or worse yet, losing the hearts of fans. But maybe, just maybe, they'll find a way out. One bold move or one lucky lottery bounce could change everything. The clock is ticking, and every minute that passes pushes the Dallas Mavericks deeper into uncharted territory. Thank you so much for watching till the very end. If you enjoyed today's video, be sure to subscribe and turn on the bell notification so you never miss our next upload.